So, this week we will be looking at acting both as a profession and as an art form, and sort of tracing a little bit of a history of acting from the 19th century onward. And so that leads me to the first thing that I want to sort of discuss is this idea of realism. In our previous chapters, realism was brought up as a sort of genre of theater. So realism is the attempt to present on stage people and events corresponding to those observable in everyday life. Now, naturalism is a special form of realism. So it's a special form of theater that sort of branches off of realism that followed more of a scientific principle of the 19th century. So that drama should look like the causes of disease in society. So it's sort of based on more of like Émile Zola's philosophy. So theater that gives an exact documentary-like impression of everyday life. But realism, really coming out of the 19th century, was a reaction to Romanticism. It was a reaction to a presentational style of acting that really dominated the stage. If you think about something like melodrama, that's a very presentational style. Well, so was Romanticism, and most actors, even actors who were doing Shakespeare in the 19th century, were very elocutionary and presentational with grand gestures and presented a character, as opposed to trying to present a character on stage that somehow was believable or corresponded to something that you observed in real life. So Stanislavsky, he was a Russian actor and director in the 19th century, but bridged into the 20th century, was interested in creating a system that actors could use that was based on realism but was repeatable, wasn't fake, or didn't use these systems of presentation. So his system really approaches acting from both what we call an interior and an exterior mode. So the psychology of the character and then the physical traits. So while it was based on realism and naturalism, what Stanislavski was interested in doing was creating a sort of life of the character by making a character that was dynamic, meaning that it could change, that it wasn't just flat or one note, and that its life, the character's life, was continuous. And so what he meant by that was that the character was coming from somewhere, that the character had a life before the character comes on stage, that there's a backstory there, and that there's a forward story, that the character has some kind of future, unless somehow the character dies, but that the character has hopes and dreams and objectives, just like people do in real life. So that actually got codified into the analysis of looking at the goals and objectives of the character and what we call the superobjective. So the superobjective is really, what does the character want more than anything else in the world, right? And that drives that character through the entire play. Stanislavski was also interested in having actors connect to each other on stage, so that actors weren't just solo, limelight, superstar kind of acting, which was very much typical of a presentational style performance. But Stanislavski wanted to emphasize the ensemble. So some of the ways in which Stanislavski retrained actors was to make outward behavior, or the gesture, the voice, the rhythm of movements more natural and convincing, as opposed to grand and presentational. Also, he wanted actors to convey these objectives and the inner needs of the character, so that there was a deep sense of conviction and belief, and thus the audience would believe this actor performing this character, and this dynamic life, or this continuous life. So when an actor would walk on stage, they weren't just walking on as a star, but you as an audience member, understood where this actor was coming from. Were they coming from another place outside? Were they coming from another room in the house? So there's all of that sort of given circumstances actually were conveyed physically, vocally, and psychologically. And then, of course, that there was this ensemble that was created where the actors were connecting with each other, and their objectives actually could possibly clash, creating that sort of conflict, what we think of today as conflict between characters. So some of the elements of Stanislavski's system consisted of techniques to relax, so relaxation, also techniques in terms of concentration for the actor, and also techniques of observation, of going out and doing what we call actor work and observing how somebody who is maybe older than you as the actor, and you need to play somebody who's much older, and you need to observe, well, how do they walk? How do they move? Writing out given circumstances, the specifics of your character, everything that you can glean from the script about your character, any past facts, age, familial relationships, etc. Then the other thing that is really important in terms of Stanislavski's system is what's called the inner truth, or the magic if. So what that means is that, let's say you're an actor and you're playing Macbeth. Well, most actors aren't murderers, or don't know what it is to, say, murder one person and then have a sort of sense of power and then murder another person. But so what Stanislavski sort of emphasized was that if you use your imagination, if you use this idea of the magic if, which is, what would you do if you were in that situation? Or what would you do if you were actually Macbeth? So you project yourself into that position using your own experience, using your own ideas and imagination about what it might feel like, what it might be like to be in that kind of situation. So the magic if is quite powerful because it allows actors to play a wide range of parts with a certain sort of truth about the approach. Also, clarifying the what, why, and how, and then also the through line of the role, or what we call the spine of the character, and understanding from scene to scene to scene what is driving that character and what their journey is. So Stanislavski developed a sort of system and training for his actors troupe in Moscow, the Moscow Arts Theater, basically around the turn of the 20th century. Some of the questions that would be important for an actor to answer as they're developing that sort of given circumstances are questions like, who am I? Where am I? What time is it? What do I want? Why do I want it? And how will I get what I want? And then what must I overcome to get what I want? So I'm going to post a little link to some actors doing a little bit of that exercise, and hopefully that clarifies a little bit of that sort of preparation or how actors use Stanislavski's system. Of course, other systems have been developed. One of the members of the Moscow Art Theater, a sort of contemporary of Stanislavski, actually who was a little bit younger, Michael Chekhov, left the company and actually moved to the US, to Hollywood, to LA, and developed his own techniques, developing what's called the psychological gesture. And actors today still use his system. Actors train in Michael Chekhov technique. Then there's more physical-based techniques, Meyerhold, biomechanics. And then there's a whole range of sort of US-based techniques and systems that you've probably heard of, like Lee Strasberg and emotional recall, or Stella Adler, who came out of the group theater, or Meisner technique, or even Uta Hagen's sort of emotion is a springboard. So all of these other actors in the early 20th and mid 20th century developed schools of thought and training studios where actors could go and train in these different techniques. But under the base of all of these techniques was really Stanislavski's system, because he really codified an acting system that moved away from presentational to a system that could live in realism. And then finally, today, actors train in combinations of techniques, and they don't necessarily stick with just one. Actors constantly learn new techniques, new training, whether or not it's movement, voice, emotional recall, ways to connect, avant-garde techniques, experimental techniques, combinations of trainings and methods, going from inside out, where an actor works the psychological first and then the physical, or maybe working from the physical where they develop the outside to the inside. So all of these techniques are certainly valid, and actors continue to combine and experiment. Next week, or sorry, not next week, but Wednesday, we'll be looking at some different acting exercises. So today I'm going to be posting some links to Stanislavski technique and some biographical information about him. And then of course you have your chapter to